Hi everyone, and welcome to the All Things ITSM Global Podcast, coming to you from Knowledge 16 in Las Vegas. I'm Kirsty McGowan, and I'm here with Ken Gonzalez. Hi Ken.
Hi Kirsty.
Charlie Betts.
Hi Kirsty.
And we have the pleasure of chatting now with Dennis Drogseth from EMA. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you.
So I actually recently heard that you're an author now. You have a book published?
Yeah, we had a team. I was actually got my name first because I wrote most of it. It is called, published by Morgan Kaufman, CMDB Systems, Making Change Work in the Age of Cloud and Agile. Mm-hmm. And we really look at non-traditional approaches to CMDB as well as some traditional. We did a lot of interviews. I love to do what I call deployment interviews, what our vendors often call customer interviews. But they're not always customers when I do the interview. So I learn what works, what doesn't work, what struggles are there, motive, etc. And so it's a bit of a journalistic exercise as well as a how-to. And yep. The goal is to provide a kind of a narrative context, what's really going on. And if I had to take a couple of, what's the real message behind all this? Yeah. Number one, use case is everything. The technology you want, the data you want, the team of skills you want, all depends on the use case you're using or prioritizing for your CMS. Ideally you want to do performance and asset and change and data center consolidation and the move to cloud. And,
Not just a one-trick pony.
Right, and world hunger and a few other use cases. But if you're starting from scratch and you think, well, we'll just build all this and we'll have all this data sitting around, it's kind of like buying a car if you don't know how to drive and then leaving it in the garage and wondering why you're not getting anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
So being very selective, being prioritized, understanding relevance. In the book we call it sometimes a system of relevance.
Huh.
And the other is, what are the technologies that are, we're getting, there are such things as real-time CMDBs, how do they come about? So we're looking at application discovery and dependency mapping, which ServiceNow calls Service Watch these days, with integrated story. Very powerful there, by the way. We're looking at automation technologies. We're looking at analytic technologies. We're looking at federated capabilities. So in a sense, the approach was, if you follow ITIL, in some ways what we're talking about is service knowledge management system.
Right.
Because otherwise the data just sits there. The car's in the garage. What are you doing with it?
Yeah. I mean, data is expensive to collect, it's expensive to integrate, it's expensive to steward the quality, it's expensive to maintain. Right. You have to have an economic reason for doing it.
Right.
And it's what I think successful CMDB implementations have found is that, continually reharvesting and continually rediscovering the data is expensive and burdensome, and so there is an economic trade-off at some point where, it's cheaper to have the data, aggregated and brought together.
Right.
But there's a balance. I mean, you can easily go too far too, and collect too much for not the right reasons.
It's really interesting to see, and depending on use case too, the timeliness, right? And one of the things we did in actually some recent research, what is the future of IT service management? That's the topic.
Yeah, tell us more about that.
Nobody here would care.
No.
You're the wrong audience. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we're here.
You're all focused on the primaries, I know. But anyway, so I was going to, the sort of segue there was we looked at primary use case for CMS and ADDM, a combination. Actually, ADDM in this case, and app discovery and dependency mapping. The number one use case turned out to be performance management.
Right.
Interesting.
For the CMS. And that requires very different technologies than if you're primarily, let's say, doing asset management.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, again, your system of relevance, you create it to your need. So what is the future of IT service management?
We certainly read a lot of naysayers saying it's dying. So yeah, I'm really interested to see what you have to say.
Yeah, not at all.
No.
Actually, what we saw was there were 2 tracks for ITSM teams. I'm going to call it the next generation track. We didn't
Okay.
call that in research. We didn't know what we'd see, the data showed. And the legacy track. We didn't. What did we use to define those teams? Growth in responsibility, growth in investment, growth overall, more prone to assimilate cloud and leverage cloud and manage cloud, more prone to support DevOps and Agile. So shrinkage and size, and then we asked a very sophisticated question at the end, something that often people scratch their heads about, but it works very well. We asked this basic question: how successful are you in your ITSM initiatives? And we give them a rank. They can choose from a ranking of 5.
Right.
So you think, well, that's just subjective. Doesn't really mean it. You're not going to.
No.
What's useful is if you take the extremely successful,
Yeah.
and you compare it to the bottom end, the marginally successful or whatever, the patterns become really interesting and very relevant, and that we use that as well.
Right.
So while people will tend to often say, I'm very successful, or, not that many people will say, I'm not successful,
Yeah.
marginally.
Right.
But if you keep that sort of those 2 extremes and you contrast them, the extremely successful were more invested in technologies. They were more likely to have a CMDB, for instance, far more interested to leverage multiple approaches to service modeling and service interdependencies, more invested in analytics, more invested in integrated operations.
Right.
And, I've done, and so more invested in cloud, more invested in Agile and DevOps, and we looked in many ways that ITSM is actually promoting and facilitating DevOps
Right.
and Agile, which
Yep.
often misses the, mainstream industry view. So I'd say one of the core, if it's not the single core, it's one of the top 2 or 3, I think it's really the single thought, which is, again, I guess good news for ServiceNow.
Yes.
And that is an integrated operations story. Fill in the blank. One of the areas I'm about to research again in depth and have really cared about over the years is user and customer and digital experience management.
Right.
And the industry has often classified that as a subset of APM, app performance.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Totally
absolutely
agree.
not.
Yeah.
I mean, that is such a mistake.
Yeah.
That isn't to say that the APM arena is not critical.
No, but there's a
No.
whole design thinking conversation
Right.
going
Yes.
on right now. I mean, that's
Yep.
completely beyond that.
I mean,
Yeah.
even if you include development,
Yeah.
which it should,
No.
ITSM figures very largely in that. And it's a complementary story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who hears the voice of despair? And how do you link that to transactional
Yeah.
data, right? And how do you link that from customer loss and revenue loss?
Yes.
And then there's also an intersection in user and customer experience, with just access, right? Access to the services. Who's facilitating that? How is that being done? That often
Right.
comes through ITSM.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Somebody's got to be provisioned, and this is something that I actually talk to my students about. The idea that you have immediate access to a given digital service is actually, not always true. There's security, there's provisioning, there's
Right.
an economic
Yeah.
aspect to it. At some point, you have to be vetted or validated by usually some human being.
That's right.
Is often in the flow, and that can define a lot of your understanding of the experience. Not sure, maybe a lot of it can be automated just with typing in a credit card number, but not all.
No, not
Yeah.
all by any means. And I'm. By the way, I will make this a public statement. If you need a worst case Inspector Clouseau guinea pig for forms, I would. I used to fail multiple choice tests
Yeah.
and things. I'm just not good at.
Yeah.
So in terms of provisioning and access.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you've got a new career in front of you
Yes.
in lean UX
Yeah.
and
I could do it.
interface
Anyone
design,
could do it.
Yeah.
interface testing.
Right.
You know,
And if
whenever
you
I
missed
have
your
to
calling,
use my iPhone, I bring my children who are now in their 20s, but I
Yep.
mean, they could have been
Yeah.
younger, and I'll say, so how do I, get access to this?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Drogseth usability testing services, I can see it.
Yeah, that's right. You try the worst possible end user, and it's me. Anyway, so there's all that factors in. I've done a lot of conversations now with, well, again, I'll call it deployments.
Yep.
Whether it's ServiceNow or, frankly, some of the other ITSM innovators.
Yep.
And what I'm also seeing from those is, so the other conversation around integrated operations is automation, process, workflow, governance,
Yes.
insight.
Yep.
Who's doing what? How are they doing it? How efficiently are they doing it? How do you break through the silos? And guess what? Those silos are still there. Yeah, they're not just in barns in the Midwest.
No, they're not.
Right, right.
And how do you break through them? The ITSM team is often providing the governance to help in that transformative
Yes.
initiative. So very positive outlook from the data.
Great.
Yeah,
That's
excellent.
very good to know. Well, thanks a lot, Dennis. It's
My
been
pleasure.
been a pleasure chatting with you again.
Yeah,
Well,
good to
thanks
see
for
you.
having me.
Yeah. Thanks.